Hi, my name is Zach Wise, and today, in this tutorial, I'm going to explain how to produce a time-lapse. According to Wikipedia, time-lapse photography is a technique whereby each film frame is captured at a rate much slower than it will be played back at. When replayed at normal speed, time appears to be moving faster, and thus lapsing. Using this technique, processes that would appear subtle to the eye, or movement and patterns, become much more pronounced. In this example, you can see the path that the stars seem to travel as our Earth rotates. Usually, star movement is not observable by the human eye because it is so subtle and moves so slow that it avoids our perception. So, let's get started. The first thing you absolutely need is an intervalometer, such as Canon's Timer Remote Controller, TC-80N3. This allows you to set an interval that the camera will take a photo at, such as 1 frame every 5 seconds, 1 frame every minute, etc. In this example, I have set my interval to 1 every 2 seconds. Something you might want to consider using is a neutral density filter, so that you can drag your shutter to a speed lower than you normally would be able to. Especially in daylight, it's hard to drag your shutter to, say, 1 second. Next, set your camera to record JPEG. Set the white balance to a manual setting, not auto, since auto white balance can fluctuate. It will appear as a flicker when you play it back at 15 frames a second. Next, manually set your exposure and your focus, and then lock it down. Do not change it. An important thing to remember is that when you play the time-lapse back, it should be about 15 to 30 frames a second. So, if you want 10 seconds of time-lapse at 30 frames a second, you'll need to shoot about 300 frames. I'm going to do a 4-second piece at 15 frames a second, so I need to shoot 60 frames. Another important thing to consider when shooting a time-lapse is the shutter speed. Drag your shutter. Otherwise, you will get what I call blips in some situations. Blips happen when the interval is much longer than the shutter speed. You will see objects appear in one frame and disappear in the next. At 15 frames a second, these appear to our eyes as little blips, popping in and out of the frame, never staying in the frame. If you drag your shutter, the objects will appear to speedily move through the frame, and this is a classic aesthetic of time-lapse photography. I've illustrated the difference that you will see if you do not drag your shutter and when you do. The first 4-second time-lapse piece I shot at 1/100th of a second. You can see people sharp in one frame and not in the next, or they appear to jump from one point of the frame to another point in the frame, essentially becoming blips moving across the screen. In the next example, I dragged my shutter, same interval, I shot it at about 1/2 of a second, and you'll see that they blur and appear to have more speed as they move through the frame. Now, once you've shot your scene, creating the time-lapse is very easy as long as you have QuickTime Pro. In QuickTime Pro, go ahead and open it up. In QuickTime Pro, go under File, and go down to Open Image Sequence. A dialog box should come up. Navigate to the folder that has all your JPEGs from the time-lapse that you shot. Select the first one in the sequence and hit Open. As long as all the images are sequential, as in 5, 6, 7, 8, etc., then it will pull in all the frames out of that folder. The next dialog box, Image Sequence Settings, asks you for a frame rate. Here you can set 15 frames a second, 24, or 30. In this example, I'm going to choose 15 frames per second. Now you should have a rather large QuickTime file. I would save the original so you can output different settings out of it if you need to. But to play it back, it might be so large that your processor cannot keep up. So you might have to wait to see the finished time-lapse until you export it to a format such as H.264, which is used for podcasting, XVID, FLV for Flash, or any other video format. When you export it, make sure that you resize, and that's all there is to it. Remember, using the time-lapse technique, processes that would appear subtle to the eye, or movement, or patterns, become much more pronounced. Here are a couple examples of some time-lapse I have shot recently.